Welcome to Maverick. This program covers 25 CEOs from different industries and brings together a think tank of knowledge for its viewers. And today we have with us Rajiv, Chief Executive Officer and Executive Director of Lion Breweries. Welcome, Rajiv, to the program.
Thank you, Niroshan.
It's lovely to have you.
Thank you very much.
To begin with, I'd love to know, as a fellow Ethiopian, how were you as a school kid? Tell me about the memories of your childhood adventures and a little bit about you at college time.
Well, I've been a Mount boy from day one, from the time I was born. So had a lot of Thomians also as my uncles. So obviously went to the same school, St. Thomas's. As a boy, I would say I was average. You know, I never excelled in anything, either sports or my studies. But what I would say is that, I was at the average level and continued like that. But what happened was that I always had ambition inside me to, it started when I was very young, at about, I would say, just before my O-levels. Yeah, around my O-levels, to take on a leadership role. And this was always turning in my head, and I used to think of, what are the routes I can do, right, in order to get here. So at that time, there was these various types of problems which existed in the university. So A-levels, I thought, if I go through this route, I'm going to take a long time to, move into my career path. And I actually didn't do my A-levels, right? I didn't do my A-levels, and I found it boring. I just couldn't, sit down and study, right? So what happens is, still my parents said, you have to do something, right? Some basic thing. So I just, sat my A-levels outside college. I sat my A-levels outside. I didn't do too well. I got a C and S, so 2 C's and 2 S's. But I wanted to do something professional. So then I thought, what can I do? So I started doing my marketing exams. I did a bit of accounting exams, right? And then slowly, as I sort of started, by about 20 years, I started working. I started working in market research. I, took a liking towards the marketing profession. And then what happened was that I picked the whole, I felt that was going to be my strength and future. I picked it up quickly, and within a short period of time became quite, I would say, conversant in my start job of market research. Continued in then after that I left. I did about 2 to 3 years of research. I left. I went and did postgraduate studies outside, and then came back and I joined. I wanted to say that I felt that if I want to progress from here onwards, I want to join a multinational, because one thing is, I wanted to get the basic foundations in place, right? And I felt multinationals give you that experience. So I tried my best in all places, and finally, right, I would call it luck and being at the right place at the right time. CTC, BAT Sri Lanka had a vacancy for a market research manager. And I had worked earlier on the account. So it was a natural pull. So I was taken immediately, and I grew within that organization. So I ended up as marketing director. I was marketing director for over 10 years at BAT Sri Lanka. And then I took a break. Because I felt, the thing was due to personal reasons. I was not willing to go out of the country also. So I took a break, and I told the company that, I've had enough, that I like to pursue something else. So 19 years in the company, I left. After that, I felt, okay, I had a hell of a lot of time on my hands. I was doing a bit of consultancy work, but then I felt I wanted to do something absolutely different. That means work for the public sector.
Right.
So I actually, for a period of close to 3.5 years, I ran state sector organizations. I ran Lanka Satosa, as a CEO. Then after that I ran a construction, state development construction corporation, another the state entity which is an engineering entity as chairman, and then I also ran a bank as chairman of HDFC bank. So I did the state sector thing, and well, I learned that there are places where you should work and you should not work, and you know, it was an experience. It was absolutely fantastic experience knowing of how the state sector works, right? But then I had enough, and then I thought I need to revert back to the private sector, and that's the time I got an invitation to pick up this role. So now I've been 3 years in this role and enjoying it.
Absolutely. I can't but not ask you as a follow-up question.
Yes.
What are your lessons from the state sector? Why I'm asking this is, we are on a crossroad in the country right
Yeah.
now. We're talking about reinvigorating our state sectors. Some people call it selling off companies, so on and so forth. What was your learning with regard to state sector organizations and their leadership?
Yeah. First thing is, Niroshan, most of these state organizations, I ran a retail organization, an engineering organization, and a bank. What I saw was the bank was a bit different because it was public quoted. So it had some level of governance and it ran at a certain level of efficiency. But let me take the other two organizations. My view is the state is basically not to run businesses, and the state can't run businesses because its procedures, practices don't entail the ability to make fast decisions and run efficient, profitable organizations, right? So that's the starting point. If we think that the state, right, has the ability, I'm not talking about people ability here, it's just the bureaucracy and the way it is structured. It is not structured to run companies.
Okay.
It's not structured to run companies. So first thing is that, right, that the state doesn't have the whole process and as well as the structure to run companies. And most of these organizations, right, were set up, Niroshan, about, 30, 40, 50 years back. Now, the problem is it was set up at that time, it had a role to play. Now, for example, let's say Lanka Satosa, then there was no supermarket chains out there, right? So, then there was a role where the state was able to, state was at that time the only party which was importing food products. So, then it had to have a conduit to sell, right, at a cheap price. So, Satosa was created, the network was created, and products were sold. But now that role has changed. Now, the private sector, there are entities which are competing. You got the Cargills, the Keys, the Spars, and the Glowmarks of this world which is competing. So, what's the role Lanka Satosa has to play, right, is a question I have got. Because at the time it was set up, it had a role.
Absolutely.
But does it have a role within the current context? So, I think the first question which has to be asked, which is fundamental, is most of these organizations which have set up had a role previously, but not in the current context. Example, another example, Building Materials Corporation. It was set up when there were no hardware businesses in this country. Now, every corner has a hardware business, right, which gives on credit, which is able to supply very quickly. So, what is the role Building Material Corporation has? It doesn't have a role, right. Then you take the engineering corporations. At that time, you didn't have all these private sector big engineering companies. Yeah. So, then there was a role to play, right, for those projects. But now all these have lost their original role which it has been set up for. So, now what is happening is it is trying to compete with all the administrative and the bureaucratic hassles, right, attached to it with the private sector. So, therefore, obviously these are going to be loss-making enterprises. Yeah. So, I don't see actually most of these enterprises, right, having a role to play, right, having a role to play, and I feel honestly that government has to have has to be bold enough to make these decisions, and there are these various talks of saying let's try to transform this, and but these are sometimes, my personal view is, these are just superficial sayings in order to manage sensitivities. But if you're really brutally honest, there is no role, so then you have to make a hard call.
Choice. Yeah.
Hard choice. Yeah. That's simply it.
Yeah. Just to swing the questions on to the other side, when I was reading about you, I was not pleasantly surprised, but it was pleasant to me to know that you had a PhD, and yet you're one of the few people I know that don't use the word doctor in front of your name.
Yeah.
I was curious why.
One reason is, Niroshan, I actually did it, right, from a perspective of not to have a title. It was more from a perspective of to enhance my learning and knowledge. Now, that was mainly, I did this in the area of privatization, right, to understand what are the frameworks, what are the existing books of knowledge around this. So, I gained knowledge, I enjoyed that period. It took me a long time. I enjoyed that period. So, that was it, So, it was personally for me, right, which I did it, and not more to get a title behind my name and show the whole world. So, I have just, I just stuck to the original purpose of why I did it, which was for self-fulfillment.
Good. Because very rarely would you find that. Do you still keep reading?
Yes, I do reading, but I have to be very honest with you. I love to read. I mean, I always watch news, which is CNN, BBC. I keep up to date with what is happening, and also I love to read business magazines and that. But at the same time, it's 50-50. I love also reading fiction, right? I enjoy reading fiction. I have got a lot of authors which I love, Wilbur Smith, Robert Galbraith. I love to read detectives, various types of novels. So that's also a very important part of my pastime, right? Which is reading for pleasure, actually.
Right, right. And who is Rajiv as a family man?
Niroshan, I am actually, being very honest with you, I am a bit of an introvert as a personality, as an introvert. Sometimes people see me a bit different or same because I smile, laugh, I talk to people, and I'm very friendly. That, okay, he's a easygoing, maybe has a bit of an extrovertish personality, but I am an introvert at heart. Right? I am, to be honest, not the most comfortable, right, in terms of interactions and so on. But what I have done is I have understood that that quality in me, and I have worked on it, right, and to some extent I have progressed. Right, I have progressed, and it has also, it's part and parcel of also the type of job roles I have handled. But I know where my weakness is, and I have actually worked on it. But can you absolutely change whom you are inside? No. But there is a certain amount of behavior which can be adopted, right, and learned, right, which is very important for you in terms of, the type of job roles and the type of context which you operate in. So that's the first point. So I love my private time, right? I love my private time. I am not a great party goer, right? And although I handle a job which involves, if I want to, every day becomes a party and opening and a bar opening or something like that. I pick and choose, right? Very, very importantly, I tell my secretary, please just maybe 1 or 2, right, during the month, to ensure that I'm in touch with what is happening, but not more, because I like to spend some quality time with my family. I would call it very family oriented. I've got 2 small kids, 13 and 11, right? And I love enjoying going and playing a bit of cricket before, you know, in the evenings with my son, you know, playing a bit of table tennis with my daughter. Because she loves to play that, and then after that, you know, getting down and doing some reading, and I want that time left for me. So I would call it pretty much of the spare time I try to protect to ensure that I get some quality time with my family.
Excellent. In a world that dapples with words like work-life balance and all that, you found a decent enough balance by the fact that you're an introvert as well. So
yeah, absolutely. And that's what I sometimes say, Roshan, it's like you know, it's about, first of all, you need to recognize where you have to do a bit of self-reflection and know, you know, you can't, you have to accept it. Because after you accept it, you look at finding solutions. You try to find solutions, because if you don't accept it, the problem is then you don't find solutions. And I always feel, Niroshan, this work-life balance, you know, people keep on saying, but I feel it is a lot on the individual. Like, you have to take the calls, right? And you have to stand up and say, okay, somebody can argue and say, because when you're a CEO, it becomes much more easier because you decide, you know, what your time is. But even, you know, levels below, right? If you are going beyond and you don't have quality time with your family, right? It is up to you to, you know, make certain calls. I mean, you stand up and say, right? And I think people who have done that, people here, and people are, you know, most people are reasonable people.
Yes, yeah.
And I think it's very important that people take this work-life balance, you know, pretty seriously, but the onus is on the individual, not always on the company, right? Right? The individual also must stand up and say, no, I am going to give this time to my family. Right? So it's a bit of both which come into play, because a lot of people, the feeling I get is they put the blame and they say, you know, boss is telling me to work hard, company doesn't give me time. But if you want, you can make time for yourself.
Choices and decisions.
And even in terms of, I always tell my young people who work, there are a few things which you have to keep balanced. One is your career, your health, and your family. These three have to go hand in hand, right? To have a, I would call it a balanced, successful life. Now, you can't go into extremes of, now if you, for example, let's say you go and you spoil your health, right? Then what is happening is your family gets affected, your career gets affected. If you go to the extreme of your career, both these two get affected. So you have to find that right balance, right, in order to ensure you have a fulfilling life. My view is, we live, although we may live 65, 70 years, and it sounds quite large, I feel in the larger schemes of the, you know, the journey of life, it is a short period. So what you finally, at the end of the day, you have to be happy, right? And if you're not happy, right, how much money you have, wealth you have, and what a great career you have is inconsequential, right? So I feel getting this balance of these three elements right give you a possibly some level of fulfillment, and most importantly that you're happy, which is the most important part of life.
What surprises me is that people are in pursuit of happiness and they disrupt one of the three. They think, if I do this more, maybe I can do the other one later on.
You can't.
And they postpone
it. You have to ensure all three are working at the same time. You can't postpone, and it never works.
Yes. Without divulging anything more, you were also very people-oriented, feeling person. I myself, I did the psychometric
Yes.
test, although that's between you and me.
Yes.
So although you're an introvert, you're also a very lovable person. When you have to make hard choices, tough decisions, and you will as a CEO,
Yes.
being a person of heart, and how do you balance the two together?
Good question, Niroshan. This is something I have to be very honest. It was a bit of a learning curve for me over my career, where I understood this and consciously I worked on it. It is not easy. It is not easy. Let me tell you, I could give you an easy answer of saying, no, I did this, now I'm doing fabulously well, and I take all these tough decisions and I'm all thumbs up. It's not, and I'm still learning, because the problem is that when you take the tough decisions, the other part, which is the more empathetic, more people friendly, tends to pull you right onto one side, and then what happens is that you sometimes then you're struggling between these two opposite dimensions pulling, right, of what shall I do, right? But what I have come more and more into grips, which I have learnt is, Niroshan, is you can still handle it, and the way you can handle it is by being honest and straightforward with people, where even when you make a tough call, let's say you have to fire a person or you have to get, it is much easier, right, if you have to have a straightforward discussion with the person, and then at the same time ensure that you have developed something where you have to move the person out, you do it in a way that gives that individual face respect, right, and you basically have make that call on that individual. But if you use what I call more and more these surreptitious routes of sidelining, putting people to the side or doing things like that, it causes a bigger guilt feeling in you. What I have learned is, on the tough decisions, let's say you have to make a tough decision to close something down, a business down, it's better for you to call or everyone, talk honestly, give the context, give the background, right, give the background, and explain to people, and then say, this is the reason why I am doing this. And most of the time what I have learned is, Niroshan, if you're honest and straightforward and you're fair, how tough the decision is, people may grumble, people will affect, but people also see, right, and understand that it is something which has to take place. So the way I have started handling this is being more direct, honest, right, about the context and the background, right, and not hiding any facts, right, and being very, very straightforward. Now that has helped me in some way to balance this thing of tough decisions versus also this whole tug you get on the other side. And what I have learned is, over the last couple of years, is most of the time I have succeeded in this regard by using this what my homegrown model of doing it, right? Now, am I 100%? No, I still say I am around 60%, and further a lot of improvement to take place. So this is something which I have practiced.
Yeah. They say culture is very, very important, and you've worked in different cultures, and you've seen how cultures can support or hinder the progress of an organization. Anything from the basics of clarity of job, right down to how they look at responsibility, how they look at teamwork, how they look at all these factors.
Yes.
What are you working on right now to strengthen the culture at Lion? And Lion is a lovely culture. I've spent some time with some of your people and very, very close to everyone.
Yes.
In terms of, it can be within your current environment, it could be out of context.
Yes.
Talk to me about your thoughts on culture.
Roshan, culture, how I see it is that culture is a set of it's a set of behaviors, attitudes, which are what you call now. You have got the policies, procedures, and the hardware which governs this is the soft part of it, which governs the way a company works, right? It's like a DNA within it. You can't see it, right? Policies and procedures, you can read it. This is for a better word, let me call it intangible, which exists within the business, which actually, in some way, it's of how the organization thinks and works, right? But it is not seen. It is not seen, right? And you can't pinpoint and show it like what a policy and procedure is. But it governs every little thing, and that's why I say getting the culture right is extremely important, because it goes down to from very small little things, from making a decision, how you make a decision, right? Now, for example, I'll tell you, at Lion is a very detail oriented company, which I have seen, right? It's like getting into the least number of the, and finally you work it at the half cent. That's the level, and that is a culture which pervades right across, right? I'm giving you an example, right? Now that is a fabulous, strength, because you're very, very diligent. But the problem is also, it also works against you, because sometimes you focus too much on the detail and you lose out on the bigger options and the bigger picture, which therefore results in you getting yourself fixated on one particular area without seeing the options and other routes which can be taken. Now, what are we trying to do at Lion, right? Is that few things. One is, Niroshan, first thing I wanted to start off is that we first of all looked at the whole organization and really looked at, is the right person in the right job? That's, for me, that is the number one, right? If I take a CEO's role, the first thing a CEO has to do is not strategy. First to see, is the right person in the right role. Strategy comes next. Now, we did a review, and we've understood that we had to move people around, and that was the first phase of it, right? We set it up. Now, what we are also trying to do is, we are trying to now also define, and that's a piece of work what we are doing, is define what are the inherent behaviors within this company, and which is related to the cultural way in which we work, right? After that, to say these are the behaviors we want to continue, these are the behaviors we want to let go of, and these are the new behaviors we want to instill. So that is a piece of work what we are currently doing. After we do that, right, we want to align, our rewards, our remuneration, our career progression also to this cultural framework what we have got, and ensure that it gets driven, it gets instilled within the business, right? So this is one big piece of work what we are currently working on. Now, whilst we do this, right, there are other things, Niroshan, which we are also doing in terms of we are bringing in new young talent into the business, right, in order to also bring in the external newer generation thinking also into it, right, where the way the new generation thinks is very, very different. So there is going to be a coexistence of the old experienced personnel and the new young mavericks, right, within the organization. So this is going to be a bit, there's going to be tension, right, but having that strength and diversity, right, is going to also support us.
Absolutely. Being a highly regulated environment that you work, it's not easy.
Yes.
Does that pose as a difficulty for you to grow as an organization? Challenges?
Yes. I have worked in two organizations which are highly regulated. One is tobacco, one is alcohol, right?
I didn't want to ask that question.
Right? So, but I have seen it in two ways, right? And I have seen the positives and the negatives behind this. The positive side of it is organizations which are regulated, sometimes you have a situation where, you know, employees, right, there is a huge amount of because they feel the whole outside is actually sort of trying to encroach into your business. There is a like a huge amount of loyalty and sort of, you know, stand up, you know, type of thing for the organization, right? And I see this, if you check, if you look at the amount of loyalty and pride, right, in some of these organizations like Lion and Tobacco, and look at the level versus other companies, you will see it very high, because you feel that the outside world is trying to encroach on you and you have to be together, right? So there is a big strength which you get from the people dimension. But what I have realized is, Niroshan, yes, there are constraints, right? There are now, if I talk about alcohol, there are a lot of constraints and regulations and so on. But it's about your mindset. It's about your mindset. And if you have a growth mindset, you have to learn to work within the constraints, right, and the laws of the land, but grow your business, right? So that is something which you have to learn to do. Now, sometimes what I have seen is that FMCGs, right? Now, some of the people we have brought from FMCGs into our industry, sometimes they struggle. Sometimes because they just tend to struggle, because now what am I supposed to do? I don't have TV, I don't have press, I don't have anything. Plus, I can't do, you know, what I can do is only point of sale. What can I do? Right? So they tend to struggle, right? But as time goes on and they become, I would say, well entrenched, and they understand that learning curve within the industry, they also see how the opportunities which are available within the industry to work within the laws of the country and regulations, but still grow your business. So I am absolutely of the view that laws, regulations, you have to abide by, but it is all about mindset. Right? If you have got that ambition to grow and the vision to see yourself as being much bigger and bigger, as well as, you know, you set your boundaries where your, you know, boundaries are endless, I would say, right? You get it done within it, right? So it's about creating that mindset within the organization.
I would totally agree. And a question I would like to rack on top of that question is, how do you create that mindset for a continuous improvement, innovation? You know, we are in a fast learning environment right now, and industry processes of manufacturing is manufacturing.
Yes.
But how do you create that thirst for newness in what we are doing within the organization?
Few things. First thing is, Niroshan, you have to basically have knowledge continuously coming into the organization, right? Now, how do you bring in this knowledge? Now, what I see is sometimes local organizations try to create this knowledge within, right? They have their R&D teams and they are doing these various things. Very good. What I personally think and what we are trying to do is that we are trying to set up, right, a more collaborative work model, right, whereby we collaborate with maybe different brewers outside, then different, let's say, flavor houses outside. It can be technology partners outside. You create this whole web of collaborative partners, right, where you work with them, right, you work with them and you continuously bring knowledge into the organization, right, which is basically at the cutting edge of what is happening outside. Now, when this whole knowledge pool keeps on coming in, what you also see with the people is that it tends to open up their horizons in terms of their minds, right? Sure. Or they say, wow, this is what the world is. I thought Lion was big. My God, now it is much bigger outside, right? And one aspect is that sometimes we say, you know, this fellow, he is useless, he can't see anything, he is only doing, you know, his little thing. That is an organizational issue also, because we have never shown him, you know, the type of world outside and the size of things which are outside there. Yeah. Now, this is one thing which we are trying to bring in, right, to Lion, right? To drive this culture of the thirst to improve, to innovate and to bring in new ideas. So, that is one of the most important things, right. Yeah. Then second one is that what we are also trying to do, which is related to this, is that Roshan, Lion, for me, a lot of people don't understand this, right, is one of the most unique organizations in Sri Lanka. The reason is, it is a hybrid organization. Neither is it a multinational, neither is it a totally local organization. You see, so you have got an organization which is like gets the best of both worlds. You have this absolute ability to act as an entrepreneur, right, by having, you know, the local, you know, the flexibility to make decisions fast and to go quickly, whilst you also have got the ability to get knowledge, process and frameworks to operate with a multinational mindset. We have got that. Then we have got partners like Diageo, right, which are the largest spirits organization. So what we are trying to do is to further entrench ourselves with these foreign companies and get our people outside. Now, multinationals have got the ability to do this very fluidly, right? Every 3 years you find people moving out. Now, this is our little model and our way of how we are going to look at this. Yeah. So, just as simple two examples is, Niroshan. One is bring knowledge, right, and show the world outside to the people, as well as get our people, right, involved with multinationals and the way they work, right, so that also supports this whole endeavor. And that is something which I feel we are still working, right, and we have progressed, but we have a long way to go. But this is something which we will push quite aggressively over the next year to 2 years.
Okay. So, as we fight an economic war, maybe even a geopolitical war, now we are fighting a currency war. You know, we have the currencies coming up to challenge dollar. So, all these wars are happening. and yet our ability to keep focus and growing is very, very important. As a strategy, what is our risk mitigation plan within the organization? Anything you can share?
Yeah, sure. Roshan, what I personally think is that in this time frame, now companies always have at least a 3 to 5 year horizon ahead, right? And they have got plans, right? They've got plans. Now, what I think is, my view is that companies should work on those plans and have it at the state of readiness, because sometimes those plans may not be not fit in, right, during this period and tenure where there is so much fluidity and so on. But that must not stop organizations of working on those plans, right, and having it in the state of readiness. Now, that is of how we are working. Now, example is that we have a pipeline of new products which we wanted to have. Now, we are working on it hell-bent, we'll have it ready, but we know that this may not be the absolutely right time frame to do this, but we want to be ready. So, I think the long-term goals and the ambitions should not be let go, right, for a period where sometimes the jolt results in knee-jerk reactions. So we should stay on course. But fit the running of the organization, right, to the immediate current environmental context, right? Current environmental context. Now, what does that mean? Now, it could be to the level where, the organizations at this point in time have to be very cost conscious. So, you may sometimes pull back on certain things, right? And you may go slow. You may go slow, right? Then you may sometimes, push back certain recruitment decisions. You may push back certain investments, right? You may do all that, but it has to be. It is basically you should not move away or deviate, right, from the longer term roadmap which you have got. What you are doing is phasing out the timing, right? You are phasing out the timing here, right? Phasing out the timing, but it should not be where I sometimes feel the organizations are, they take this current context, take a knee-jerk reaction, right, and completely, right, operate, and they derail, right, all their long-term plans, and they focus only on the short-term current context. So, the way we are working with Lion is that we are keeping the longer term context in mind, right, changing and operationally, right, operationally being sensitive to the context, right, operational context. But what happens is that whatever decisions we are taking now, we use the longer term plan as the sort of bouncing board, right, to check whether we do it or not, right. So that's the type of thing which I feel the way we should operate within this context.
I think your advice is valuable for the country as much as it's valuable for companies, because moment even the country is thinking of short term things and not necessarily long term. We are only worried about next week and next month and a few little queues reducing. So having those long term things are important. As a person, given this environment, as an individual, what worries you the most?
One of the main worries I have got is, Niroshan, is that I worry about talent and people, because this is the same thing, the short term thinking. Suddenly this whole knee-jerk reaction of oh my God, economic turmoil, I need to run away from this country. I need to run away from this country because this country doesn't have a future. But what I have seen is, Niroshan, is that this happened, right, over the last couple of months, but I see the tide turning a bit. I see the tide turning, and I see that people who have even made these short-term calls, right, are rethinking of the call they've made.
Yeah, okay.
Call they have made, right? And I get a lot of calls saying, people who have left, of can I meet you, you know, over the next couple of months, I'm coming to Sri Lanka for, you know, a holiday. So what I worry is that especially, right, now this is something organizations also have to give some thought to, is that that especially in this area of middle management, in the area of middle management where there is more younger managers in there is a tendency where these the individuals, right, are going to make short-term calls and decisions, right, short-term calls and decisions, which result in them making, I think, the wrong call for themselves personally, and which also causes a lot of disruption within the talent pipeline of organizations. For me, this is one of the most worrying things I work with, because finally we are losing good people, right, and then what you are going to be left with is the next level of people, right, within the organization. So again, you have to then think about bringing people from outside, and again you're getting maybe people who are, you know, who are possibly at the next level, right, because of this whole mentality and drain of talent drain which is taking place. So talent for me is one of the most important things which is lying, you know, which is a very, very big worry for me, because Niroshan, now we have brought in a lot of young people into the organization, but let me tell you, it has been a very, very daunting task to recruit the right person. Very tough, right? To find the right person has been extremely tough. Sometimes it has taken us 9 months to recruit into a role. So talent and talent retention, right, is an extremely worrying thing for me, and this is something which we are currently paying a lot of emphasis in order to manage. The only way we are trying to manage this is, one of the main things is giving money is not, it doesn't sort the thing out. It doesn't sort it out. But it's more, the only way I feel is that you have to keep on talking to these people, explaining, right, the type of options, career options, and which is available within the organization, and also telling them that, you know, sometimes what I feel with young people nowadays is fantastic, right, great attitude, great everything, but one thing they lack is patience, right, is patience. And sometimes patience for me is one of the greatest virtues and strengths a person can have. And you need to be a bit patient, right?
Yes.
And that is the piece of advice I can give a younger managers who are, you know, sometimes, you know, they get flustered and they want to make quick decisions and on it.
Probably the last question of the evening. If there was advice, I mean, you've been through different companies, different leadership roles, a few pieces of advice to give the up and coming C-level, senior people, CEOs, MDs, what would that be?
Niroshan, the first thing is that I am sort of, this learning which I have got is that we should never ever get, this is the piece, the only piece I am going to talk about in terms of advice, is that we sometimes, when we work in Sri Lanka, we have a bit of island mentality, right? We think within these boundaries, right? And I sometimes wonder, right, except the companies, you know, which have worked in the B2B areas and won like Brandix, Mars and some of the other companies, and okay, Dilma is another example, is that your appetite, right, your appetite to grow outside, compete and win, right, is very limited, is very limited. You tend to stick within these boundaries, which is like a safe haven, right? You can live within this small pot, you can make some decent amount of profits and money, and you can keep going. But if we are to move as a nation, right, move as a nation, our CEOs, right, have to think beyond Sri Lanka, have to think beyond Sri Lanka. They have to really look at, right, of how you grow outside, and for me that's the test of the organization.
Okay.
The real test. If you can grow outside, right, you can grow outside, then you are competing against the best, right, and you have been successful.
Yeah.
You have been successful. So my advice is, let us not get I would say overly carried away with the type of, you know, the little profits what we make within our boundaries and shows, right, and think how successful we are. Ask the question, right, of how successful we are outside our boundaries and shows, and that sometimes will raise I would say questions in your head of that we may not be as successful as what we think we are, right? And that is exactly currently the thinking we are trying, right, to push through in Lion. We are a market leader, right? It is unparalleled market leadership. But okay, we are an island nation, we have, you know, 6 liters per capita. Is this our boundaries? Right? How do we take this brand and make it successful outside? That's the test.
Yeah.
That's the test, right? And we have to then look at things very differently, right? We have to set up organizations, the way we work, very differently. But let me tell you that as you start working outside the shows, right, the type of learnings and the type of the levels and the standards which you operate, right, become very, very different, right? And those things you can bring into your business.
Absolutely.
So that's one of the main, I would say, key pieces of advice I can talk to my fellow colleagues, right, the CEOs and MDs of this country.
Chief Executive Officer of Lion Brewery, Rajiv, that was a wonderful hour to spend with you. Lot of advice, lot of thought has gone into it. Wonderful conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Niroshan. Thank you for having me. Thank you so much.
Good luck.
Good.